this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. About a month ago, I was contacted by a news reporter, and it's not unusual to have the press reach out to me. I'm on all these programs, and I never, my wife always says, and my buddy Dave always says, I'm not in a position where I can really say no, and I take that to heart, and I rarely do say no. But this was a different phone call because it wasn't a national news reporter from one of the big traditional mainstream media types. This was from a local news station in Birmingham, Alabama, which Dave and I roughly live about 60 miles, I guess, east of Birmingham. It's the closest big city for us. And what she wanted to talk to me about was something that was so mind-blowing that had occurred in Birmingham. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing at the time because of the sheer scale of it. Most of the time, when we talk about deaths in America, we think of deaths in terms of numbers. Certainly, that's the way the media measures it. And to a certain degree, those of us that are death investigators, we remember those huge events because they're so complex and difficult to watch and participate in. This had happened almost in our backyard, and it was a single individual who was responsible for 14 homicides. Let me say that number again. 14 homicides and multiple other injuries. And they didn't all occur at the same time. That's what we're going to be talking about on Body Bags today. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Brother Dave, you and I have spent a considerable amount of time in Birmingham over the years. You certainly more so than I. You had a very steady gig there for a long time and worked in local radio and traveled up and down the road, back and forth.
Oh, buddy.
And you've seen more of it than I have. I've had some great concert experiences and things like that over the years in Birmingham. And it's not what it used to be. It is a relatively dangerous place to a certain degree. I'll throw a number out to you. It's essentially, they have a homicide rate that came in last year. It's 7 in 10,000 people. For every 10,000 people, there's 7 homicides.
Didn't realize it was that high.
It's pretty doggone high. It's at one point in time over the last decade, it was per capita. It had become one of the most violent cities in America. And it's a real shame. It's got a lot of beauty to it. I think about, people don't think about mountains in Alabama, but it's ringed by, this beautiful little series of ridges.
Red Mountain.
Birmingham itself kind of sits down in a bowl, and it's surrounded. And, when I was a kid, one of the things I remember traveling down I-20 and we'd go through Birmingham, I couldn't see Birmingham because it was considered to be the Pittsburgh of the South. It's where steel was manufactured, and you couldn't see it. And so it had this kind of black cloud that floated over it, but there was a lot of money. People like Union Carbide and U.S. Steel were there. And of course they all left after a period of time. The skies cleared up, but what was left behind were a lot of poor people.
Joe, as we were looking at this topic, it's interesting how you think of Birmingham versus how I do. And it really comes down to a background of what we do for a living, what we've done prior to this. My world has always been on the radio. And depending on what format, it's just crazy how you look at a market. You break it down economically and where's your listener pockets and things like that, by zip codes and by addresses. And you learn a lot about a city's economics, and basically you learn the nitty gritty of a city to know where you need to do your promoting and your marketing. And Birmingham is one of those places that has such an incredible history that it defies a lot of the normal things that you do when you try to figure out where to market. You actually have to consider every part of the city. And then beyond that, because in the Birmingham metro area, you have one of the fastest growing cities in the nation in Hoover, Alabama, that just kind of blurs in with Birmingham. So it's a wonderful place, really interesting. I had a lot of fun there. Had a lot of my career was spent on the air in Birmingham, Alabama. Birmingham and Raleigh are very I love both of them. And anyway, when I saw this number, Damien McDaniel, is he a mass killer or a serial killer, Joe? We've got 14 people dead in 14 months. And all I could think of is, why is this not a national story being screamed by, every crime talk show person there is? We haven't talked about it, but our show is Body Bags. And we have mentioned this a couple of times to one another. As a matter of fact, when we first talked about it, it wasn't 14. I think it was 11.
Yeah, it was. And now there have been more deaths attributed, to him. And I have to say this very plainly. You asked me about serial killer versus a mass killer or a mass killing. There are elements here, I think, that would define him as potentially both. That's what makes this kind of rare. I think that this would be like with the behavioral sciences unit at the FBI. This would certainly, these cases that are laid at his feet or have been laid, and he's only been charged. He has not been convicted at this point. The behavioral sciences unit, they would consider this to be an outlier. This is somebody that they would want to study, and the events surrounding this, because I don't know how a person like this is produced. That when you start off at such an intense level like this, and you continue to literally blast your way through the city's population at these various spots, and they happened on different dates. Most of the time as we were just up in Long Island at the Hamptons Whodunit, and we got into a discussion up there about Lisk with others around us. And, there have been a lot of cases now that have been laid at Rex Heuermann's feet as well. And they say that there could be more. I'm hearing that from locals up there. And I think a lot of people concur with that. Those crimes were committed over a protracted period of time, and they were in fact serialized. So if you just, you think about, like series TV, the way it used to be, where you get one episode per week. Okay. That's a series of events. All right. Then you have a mass event where someone walks in and they kill multiple people. And there's generally not a number applied to that, other than the way we've always defined it in my world, not behavioral scientists, but the way we've always defined it in my world has been, how much strain can your system handle relative to triaging out injured individuals and then handling the number of dead that you have at a scene that are physically dead at the scene, than those that die at the hospital. And can your facilities handle all of these deaths? And that's kind of how we measure it. It's a bit different than maybe the rest of the world looks at it. And from a system standpoint, when I look at this, it would be a strain, because look, if you're in some small little town, and you have 3 people that are killed, all right, and say you've got a population of 1,200 folks, all right, you got 3 people killed at one time. that's going to strain, that's going to tax your resources incredibly. People don't think about that. You just think, well, we got three people that have been killed. How big of a lift it is. Well, it's a huge lift when everybody that works that have critical positions there, many of them are volunteer individuals. Okay. And then if you're isolated, how are you going to get the bodies to a morgue? How are you going to get the samples to the crime lab? All these things come into play, and you don't think about it. That's the reason people study things like emergency management. There is a post-mortem section within emergency management. But back to the idea of this being a serialized event, most of the time when we were talking about up in Long Island, they've got another guy up there that they'd like for at least 2 homicides. But based upon the template that has been put forward traditionally for serial killers, he wouldn't qualify. Generally, it's 3 or more. Okay. But Dave, this guy takes the cake in Birmingham, as far as I'm concerned, because he has in fact gone well above double digits here. And when you begin to think about also the number of injured, and we don't know what that means when they say injured, because you can be injured, and you can be injured because of a ricochet off of an asphalt surface, and maybe a fragment of bullet or a fragment of asphalt goes into your leg. Well, you're injured. But you can also be injured by taking a round to your midline of your abdomen and severing your spinal cord. And then that's
a big difference, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's a huge gulf. And
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hop on.
No. And so you're looking at that, and let me tell you something else. And this is kind of interesting. People don't think about this. If you have someone, for instance, that is shot in one of these events, and they're put on a vent in ICU somewhere, and I've worked cases like this, Dave, they're put on a vent, and I don't care if it's 2 decades that go by, if it's 3 decades that go by, and they survive all that time, maybe they're in a nursing facility. When they die, their manner of death is ruled as a homicide, because it's the old one of a nail, a horseshoe was lost. It's like if his path had not crossed that individual's path that night, and he had not fired that weapon, striking that individual, would the person otherwise have been injured like this? Okay. And there's no way to say any otherwise, that would not have happened. So the responsibility for the injuries, and if they die eventually, that goes on his account as well, Dave.
That's such an interesting thing. The first time I heard that explained to me, it makes perfectly good sense. It's just you can die many years later, and the guy, he might already be dead, but, it's still a murder and he's responsible. I want to get to one thing very quickly, because when this story was first brought to me, and I actually checked my email on this just a few minutes ago, it was after the first murders, or the first murder of a firefighter, because it happened in July of 2023, Joe. And I remember the email came in, and we were in a period with the show where we had a little bit of time to chill. It was summertime. And looking over some of the stories, this one came across my desk. And it was when 2 firefighters on July 12th of 2023, Jordan Melton and Jamal Jones, they were doing their routine maintenance, at Station 9, which is 27th Street North in Norwood, which is an area of Birmingham. And while they were working, a man they believe is Damien McDaniel, who we're actually talking about today, entered the station through an open bay door that they would leave this door open. Talk about a community. They left this door to the fire station open, Joe, because they lived in an area that had a number of elderly citizens, not always in the great health, and they wanted them to have a place to go to have their blood sugar checked, to have their pulse, their heart rate, things like that. And every day people would come by, and it saved them a trip to the doctor or an ambulance ride to the hospital, or the things we do not think about that fire rescue people do on a daily basis really does restore your faith in mankind. And
I you know how I feel about firefighters. I've made this perfectly clear. And let me say this again. Yeah, cops, I guess, you can say, and they make a big deal out of community policing and all these sorts of things. Firefighters have been doing community work for years and years. And that's one of the most attractive things about the fire service is that they actually have a house that is in the neighborhood. They refer to it as the firehouse. Now, I'm not saying that they've got a soup kitchen there, but if you're coming in there and you're distressed, it's what's referred to as a helping profession. And the fact that these two guys had the bay doors open, and the one thing about firefighters is I'm reminded of a fire station I used to go to in Atlanta every now and then, and I'd become friends with this group of firefighters, and I'd go by and eat some of the best food in the world, by the way. And they made a big deal out of cooking. The only thing is you either had to bring something or you had to clean up afterwards. And so I always volunteered to clean up. I didn't care because food was so good. But you can come and go. Let me throw out another interesting point about firefighters, Dave. In most states, if you kill a firefighter while they are on duty, did you know that that's an automatic capital offense?
No, didn't know.
Oh, yeah.
Glad it is.
Yeah, and in some states, if you kill a teacher while they are at work, it's an automatic capital offense. So
didn't know that.
He's rolled up on both of these guys who I can only imagine, the thing that they do, they love to wash those trucks. They love to roll hoses. That's one of the things that they do. They're pulling preventative maintenance. They're not walking around with weapons on their hips.
No.
They're in there cleaning and keeping the bay clean and keeping their units clean and all that sort of thing. And this wild man walks in and for no reason whatsoever shoots both of these guys. It's inexplicable, Dave.
He walks through the open bay door and opens fire. They had no reason to suspect that was going to happen on that day. And the thing that gets you really right in the heart is that Jordan Melton, he had only been on the job a year. He had just graduated from the recruit academy. This is something that he was doing because he had passion for it and wanted to do it. And he's still a rookie. He'd been with Birmingham Fire and Rescue just about a year in time to, go through the academy. I mean, It boggles my mind.
After a year, he'd probably just gotten off probation. Actually.
Yes. And 5 days after Damien McDaniel allegedly walked into the bay, we still don't have a reason, Joe. And he died. Jordan died 5 days. Jordan Melton died 5 days after the shooting. Jamal Jones was injured, but it still crushes your soul to a degree when you think of guys who start their day thinking of what they can do to help, what they can do to make the world a better place. And for no reason, somebody comes in and opens fire.
Yeah. And looking at this case and cases in their totality now, we know that with the injuries and subsequent death of this young firefighter, this was only the beginning of a reign of terror that dropped on the city of Birmingham. $14 dead in 14 months, Dave. Yeah, I have to say that we're going to talk about this more. It's rather complex because we've got two real seminal events here that occurred on separate nights. There are other people that have been injured along the way. And looking at it from an investigative perspective, I'm thinking, what in the world was going through the investigators' minds? Because, Birmingham, I guess, what would you classify it as? Would you say that it's kind of a mid-sized city relative to population? You think about the metro area and everything?
The metro area, and get the metro is, I guess 1 million people. And then you
Yeah.
include we used to call it the TSA, the total surveyed area, when you get into radio ratings and, you go out beyond that. But yeah, I mean, you're talking about a metropolitan area that probably is in the 58 and the country, in 50 to 55 to 60, somewhere ranking in there, just your mid-size metropolitan area with all the things you'd expect. We've got legendary Birmingham Barons, and they play at the legendary Rickwood Field, which has been redone. There's so many things that have taken place in Birmingham. The historical value of the city alone, I encourage people to study and look at the letter written by Martin Luther King Jr. from the Birmingham jail. And look at all that history that's living and breathing, and half the people that live there don't know it because
they don't.
And that's what burns me, because it is a wonderful, beautiful place. And anyway, we can do our Chamber of Commerce commercial later, but I wanted to get to what it's like, Joe. And I don't mean that not like prurient interest, but what is it like from your perspective of a mass killing situation? And something did strike me. The reason we don't usually have more than one mass killing by the same person is because they usually kill themselves, or they are killed,
or they're killed.
The chaos.
Yeah. And every now and then, they will be subdued by the police. They'll flee, and sometimes the police catch them. But many times with those individuals, you learn later that they've got some kind of weird psychopathology that's going on, and they've been quote unquote troubled and all this sort of thing, and they weren't in their right mind. The term paid hitman has come up in this narrative. And so that makes this all the more chilling. When I think paid hitman, I'm thinking about the movie Iceman. The Iceman came out a few years ago with Michael Shannon.
Isn't that based on a true story?
Yeah, it's based on a true story. And this guy killed tons of people, but was living a normal life, was a great father. They went to church, the whole 9 yards. This is something, this is a new creature that we're seeing here, because it's so horrible relative to the idea. Here's what gets me. It's like you develop a thirst for it, almost, it would seem, or maybe your thirst is money. How much money are you paid to take another person's life individually? How much more so if you go in and kill multiple people? And is your target one person within a mass grouping, and you're just going to take everybody else out? I can tell you from a forensics perspective, based upon the mass shootings that I've worked over the years, which there have been a few, it's something that you don't get past easily. I think that one of the most difficult things is the fact that you're standing among the dead. And that sounds kind of odd. It's not like standing among the dead in the morgue, where you've got bodies that are on stainless steel tables, they're about to be autopsied, or you walk into the cooler and there's bodies on gurneys. That's different. You're talking about walking into a parking lot and there are dead people to your left and to your right, or there is like massive pools of blood that have been left behind by those that have been evacuated, and they're going to eventually die. You've got people that are still there on scene, and it's like mass chaos when you roll up. You really have to be able to find that place in your mind and in your heart where, and I know this sounds real new agey, I don't know how else to put it, where you can kind of center yourself, where you can block out everything, because there's a lot of static. Because people freak out. Many people do that have become witnesses, as I think they have a right to. How else would you react? I know how I would react, but you want to be, as an investigator, when you roll up on one of these things, you want to be that kind of calm in the storm, because your job involves examining every bit of evidence that's there. One of the biggest nightmares, particularly at night, I always, because I screwed up so many times, I always tell my students is that when you're walking about in the dark and maybe you pass over someone with a flashlight and you didn't notice it, and you hear a metallic tink that kind of travels across concrete or the asphalt, and you just realize you kicked a shell casing that you didn't see, or you hear something crunch underfoot. It's a nightmare because you don't always see everything in a poorly lit area. And the mass shootings that we're talking about actually took place, at one place is like an illegal club that was dispensing alcohol, and another place is a legitimate place that was like in a strip mall. Right. Where you had a huge group of people kind of gathered out there.
And, I'm so glad you started this off by mentioning that the term hitman has been thrown around, getting paid to kill somebody. And I was looking over kind of a timeline. But before we do this, very quickly, I'm going to throw something out there to you. When we're talking about mass casualty event, a lot of times, body bags, we focus on crime, but, there are mass casualty events that do not include guns and ammo and anybody doing anything. I was in one. And when you were describing the chaos on scene in a natural disaster, a tornado hits a building and you've got the dead, the dying, the wounded. I mean, it's a crazy scene, and you're not in fear of somebody running around with a gun. It's crazy enough in that. And it just hit me what it must be like for those in a scene where you've got that shooter. It wasn't a natural disaster. It wasn't something that just happened. It was somebody who actually grabbed a gun and went into Trendsetter's nightclub and opened fire. But he got warmed up. We got in July of 2023 going into a fire station and allegedly killing one, wounding another. Then 6 months later, January 2024, Mia Nickerson is actually wounded at her. Mia Nixon is wounded at her house and dies in her driveway. She's a 21-year-old woman. Now McDaniel is tied to that murder. Go a couple of months later, and we're at a UPS facility, Joe, April 2024. Okay, so now the timeline's getting tighter. July 2023, January 2024, now April 2024, and a guy, Anthony Love Jr., gets off work. He's going through the parking lot, and he gets shot and killed right there on his way leaving work. Now, a couple of months later, it's 1 year after the shooting at the fire station, July 2024. You're at Trendsetters in Birmingham. It's just after 11 o'clock on p.m. on July 13th. Officers respond to the call. Multiple shots fired. Joe, you've heard that call go out.
Yeah.
The first responders go, and chances are you're going to be in the thick of that at some point soon.
Yeah, and the way that it works most of the time, if you're an ME investigator or coroner investigator, you're sitting there and you have your radio on, and you're on the main channel or there's a headquarters dispatch. This is the way it was in Atlanta. And you'll hear a call that will come up. And this would have been a call that would have gone out to every zone or precinct in the city, because you got multiple precincts. Most of the precincts have their own radio channel. But they would have sent this thing out broadly, because if you've got what turns out to be a mass shooting and these things start to trickle in, your ear all of a sudden tunes into this, and you can actually hear the voices change on the radio. It's kind of chilling. The voices change, the tenor of the voices change. You can tell that there's an urgency. Because the first thing they're trying to do is secure the scene relative to, is there still an active shooter? And then you've got people in the background that are screaming in pain. And you've got people that were not shot that are trying to render aid, and they're screaming as well because they don't know if the environment is safe. And then people that are not used to being around dead bodies are suddenly staring down at maybe a person that was standing there with a drink in their hand one moment. And the next thing you know, they're bleeding out on the ground next to you. And they eventually die, and you watch them die. So yeah, it's a matter of chaos. And what you're listening for, my radio number in Atlanta used to actually be ME13. What a number, right? And I would hear them call out. They would say, "Can you roll the ME?" And I knew that if I had heard that preceded by that there had been a mass shooting event, I knew that I was going to have to contact our affiliate drivers and say, "Listen, you guys need to be in the bullpen warming up, because we're going to have a need for more than one vehicle to transport the remains that we're going to have out there." And so you're thinking, and the time to think about this and plan it is not when it happens. You have to be exercised and prepared before this happens. And you don't want to think that it is, but it always does. And it is, and it's still chaos when you roll up out there, because this is the thing about it, is that an event like this, as disgusting as it is to think about, attracts spectators. And there's no way to keep them out. And
at
you
night?
say, well, what? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've actually been on scenes, Dave, at 4:00 in the morning, where I've had mothers standing outside the tape holding a newborn or a 6-month-old on their hip, laughing and carrying on, with other new mothers standing outside the tape watching everything that we do. I've actually seen little kids playing in the dirt outside of tape, where we've had shootings, and the kids are just playing. It's, it's normalized. And so it's an absolutely horrible thing to bear witness to, because I'm thinking, as rough as my childhood was, I was never exposed to anything like this. And, how is this going to impact? How does it impact an entire neighborhood when you know that this is happening out there?
Now,
and this is not something that happens every day.
Right. Now, Joe, something that catches my attention on this one. Now, we kind of broke it down as to how we got to this point a year after the very first shooting involving Damien McDaniel III. But in this particular case, a birthday party or something was going on inside the club, Trendsetters, and a disagreement, scuttle, whatever you want to call it. Something happened inside that club, and the shooting was done from the outside in. Officers found a 39-year-old man on the street, or Stevie McGee, I think was his name. Anyway, they find him or her. Is Stevie? I don't know if Stevie's a man or a woman. I apologize for that. Anyway, 39-year-old is found on the sidewalk outside the club, and it pronounced dead. They go inside the club and they find more dead bodies. Damien McDaniel is still in the middle of this. Now, there's other people involved in this shooting as well, but Damien McDaniel, how does he go from being the suspect for killing at the fire department, and then on the scene of a 21-year-old woman at her house, and then a UPS driver, and now a mass casualty event at a nightclub, drive-by shooting, picking off whoever happens to be out? You're not going to be able to pick people to shoot when you're out on the street, Joe, shooting into a building. It's just
you're not. It's randomized.
You're just shooting whoever you can.
Yeah, and that's what makes this particularly evil, in my estimation, at least.
Oh, I'm with you. That's what I was trying to figure out. I mean, not like any murder is better than another, but
no. But
my
you have to contextualize it.
Yeah.
And
what kind of evil does it take to shoot into a building with a bunch of people at a birthday party?
Yeah, you're right. And when you say birthday party, you're going to have all manner of people that are there. You might have people that, I don't know, that like to drink and party, and you might have other people there that just want to come by, and a well-wisher, that just says, I'm going to slide by tonight and just tell my man, happy birthday. And to randomize it like this, one of the things you're looking at as well is if the shooting starts outside and it's passing through the wall or through the door, this is going to complicate the forensics in many ways. Did you know that if you've got someone that is standing like immediately adjacent to what we call an intermediary target, and that round passes through that wall, whether it's press board or if it's, some kind of external siding, it goes through insulation, then it passes through drywall. A lot of that stuff that's in the wall depending upon where the individual is relative to where the bullet actually enters the room, the physical space, is carrying a lot of that stuff with it. First off, the bullet's going to be deformed. So it's going to be real hard to get rifling off the bullet. And a lot of that other stuff fragments and becomes almost like shrapnel. I've seen many cases where I've seen bits of particle board buried into people's bodies, where there has been multiple rounds that have been popped off. And you'll see this over and over again. And so it makes this even more complex. Then to pull the trajectories that you're going to have to try to understand, like if we're pulling trajectories at a scene and you have an external shooter, you've got a shooter that is outside of the building and they're firing a weapon into that building. We used to use trajectory rods, but now, which are these static rods that you can place through a hole and it'll give you an idea of directionality of the bullet, the pitch of the bullet. Did it move from right to left to right, that sort of thing. But now we use lasers. And so you'll see these kind of colored lasers. The two most common are generally green and red. And if you can pass those through a defect in the wall, you can track that back to the point of origin where the individual was shooting from, perhaps. And then that trajectory line will pass through where the person was physically standing or stooped when they were shot. Now, they might not, they're obviously, if they were standing, they're not going to be in the same position, but it'll give you an idea forensically as to the position of the individual when the bullet struck them initially, where it marries up with that person's body. Now, if they're shot and they run away, it's not going to provide as much actual information. But if they drop where they were shot, you can say, okay, well, based upon this line of trajectory, I can get an idea this individual is positioned in this location when the shooting started. And where is the round anatomically in the body? Was it like an immediate death where they struck in the mid chest, where they struck in the head, where they struck in the lower back, where maybe they didn't die immediately, they just laid there and bled out? Or was somebody shot here and they were like shot in the shoulder and then they went for cover after that? It gets very, very complex. And that's why scenes like this, Dave, they take hours upon hours to work. You don't think, because for every body that is there, okay, just let me break this down for you and our friends. For every body that is there, think of it this way. Just like everybody has their own name, each one of these bodies is an individual case. Okay. All right. So this isn't just one case. If you've got multiple individuals that are shot in one location, yeah, you got the same address. But for every person that is either wounded or killed, they have an individual case number that is placed with them. Well, why is that important? Well, it's important. For one, it helps us identify that specific individual, and we will work that case. Let's just say it's case number 25-0001, first case of the year. Well, lying next to him is 0002 and then 0003. So those are separately jacketed. And so you work that case individually. And it's going to take more than one of you to do this. Most of the time with a mass shooting, you have to break it down into teams. Ideally, and we did this with the Buckhead shooting in Atlanta all those years ago, we had 3-person teams that went in and worked each body. So you'd have an ME investigator, a homicide detective, and a forensic tech. So you had one person examining the body, one person doing the periphery of the body, and then you had another person documenting the body. And that's for it's that complex. And then you'll have a lead investigator with the police department that will have to combine all of these jackets, okay, of information, each one of these case files with an individual case number. It gets so very complex. The complexity continues on when these people are, the deceased at least, eventually wind up at the morgue, because you handle each one of these bodies individually and you work your way through it. And it can be a nightmare at the morgue, say the next day, where you have a mass shooting. I've been in a morgue where we've had mass shootings before, where we had 7 people that were all killed in one event. Well, they're lined up. You still have other cases that you have to do, but these bodies are probably going to take the numbers at the head of the line. Each body has to be x-rayed. Each one of their injuries has to be appreciated. Their clothing has to be collected, look for trace evidence, everything that is involved. And so it's stacked, as you can imagine. It's like trying to land planes in stormy weather. And you're working each individual case, and you have to make sure that you have the same, Dave, that you have the same precision on each one of these cases as you would if it was a single homicide that you happened to catch that day and that's the only homicide you had. So, and you get tired. I mean, it is physically draining to have to do these. So you really have to be on your P's and Q's working your way through it. What's fascinating about this is with this perpetrator, Dave, he has literally been the trigger mechanism, literally and figuratively, for multiple of these events. Think about that. All of our friends think about that. For every time one of these rounds slammed into one of our fellow citizens, a case number is generated. Forensics are generated. A case is started. A case is investigated. A subject is charged. A subject will eventually go to court. And we'll have a name. We'll have a name for that individual as they stand before the court and answer for what they have done. Dave, you just reminded me of something that is, again, unique to this case. I think it's unique in the sense of the numbers that we're talking about.
Shocking is what it actually is, Joe.
I guess, shocking is probably more accurate than unique.
I didn't think that was possible anymore, but what you were talking about in I'm not the only person that's going to say this, Joe. It just didn't occur to me what had to be generated during the course of investigating a mass shooting, where you're dealing with multiple people wounded, or injured and dead. In the case of Trendsetters in Birmingham, after the scene, you've got, you have the dead on the floor and what have you. You've got the investigation going on, and there were people they were triaging there, wounded individuals.
Yep.
11 people that night went to UAB, which is a hospital in Birmingham, University of Alabama, Birmingham. And 11 people went to the hospital with injuries afterwards that didn't go through the police or anybody else at the scene. They came on their own. And of those 11 victims, one of those, a 24-year-old man, actually died of his injuries at UAB after all of this had gone on. Unbelievable.
It really is the volume that you're talking about. It's you talk about total chaos, because when you have these individuals, first off, if you're UAB, which is arguably, I guess, the largest trauma center maybe in the state of Alabama, I would imagine. It's a massive teaching hospital, by the way, one of the finest in the country. It's got a long-standing history. You've got these other 11 that have rolled in. Now, knowing that UAB is the trauma center to go to, those individuals that would have been triaged at the scene and thrown into ambulances and taken quickly to the hospital, they're already filling up all the bays. Just think about everybody in the sound of my voice right now. Just think about what it's like if you've ever had to go to an emergency room on a busy night and multiply that by a factor of about 100. If you've got, if you think that you've got an upset tummy and you decide to go to the emergency room and you roll in there and you're writhing in pain on a gurney, you're going to have to take a number and wait. That's what it comes down to. And they might not get to you for hours upon hours upon hours. Matter of fact, they might say, look, you're going to be better served by getting in your car and going somewhere else, because everything is going to be thrown, because you've got people that have got gaping defects in their body that are losing blood. You've got people that have fractured bones. Oh, by the way, not to mention you've got people that got perforated organs. So they're having to be evaluated and get them up to a surgical suite. And then they've got to call in all the trauma surgeons and all of the residents that work for the trauma surgeons just to handle this guy. It is a war zone at this point in time. Oh, and by the way, we've got 11 more people from the Trend Centers event that happened to come in, what they refer to as ambulatory. They would walk in on their own, or maybe a friend drug them in. You're not bringing them in by ambulance. So you're stacking more on top. So it's a real stressor on the entire system.
Something
the
you can't
fact
even
that
imagine.
they don't have more people that have died is kind of amazing, Dave.
I'm just shocked. I did not know what all went into it. And now I'm taking this a little bit further out, and I'm thinking from a professional standpoint, Joe, a lot of the men and women working in law enforcement, in the medical examiner's office, seeing the number of deaths like this. And, we have the Trendsetters event, and then you've got the people coming in after. But, right on the heels of that, Joe, there were another group of murders that took place that are going to be attributed to Damien McDaniel and others. But in particular, on September the 19th, 2024, a woman, Deontrante Tene Brown, they say she was an innocent bystander in what amounted to a shooting that took place outside or inside the 604 Bar and Lounge. It was this is a one-off. And boy, I feel like I'm really being dismissive, and I'm not. I'm trying to point out what was going on, because again, these are all attributed to the same person now. And by the way, there are also other people that are joining McDaniel on different events of these. And on September 19th, you've got Ms. Brown. On September 21st, 2 days after that murder, outside of the Hush Lounge, that's another mass shooting event. You've got 4 killed and 17 others injured. This is a bar in the 5 Points area of Birmingham. This is an area where there's a lot of foot traffic. It's a very busy place, especially at night. It is a happening place. And to have a mass casualty event, a mass shooting event there, Joe, on the heels of what they've already seen. I'm just thinking, if you're working in law enforcement and going on these calls, do y'all talk amongst yourselves with other professionals and discuss what's going on and say, what's happening here?
Yeah, and it's real easy to get caught up in all the peripheral stuff that goes along, but you have to draw your focus back to what's the most important thing, and that is try to understand who or what you're dealing with here. Have these people been targeted because they're a member of some group, which doesn't seem likely, because it seems on its face, it seems rather randomized. You've got people that are out in the evening, but there are a lot of people that are out in the evening. It seems to me that it has a bit of organization to it, because if we go back to this premise that he has been hired as a hitman, if he goes in and creates as much chaos as he possibly can, it sounds like something out of a movie. He can target the one person that maybe he's being paid to kill, allegedly, and creates a tremendous amount of chaos while they're doing it. The target doesn't get away, and he can blend in while he's doing it. Because with chaos, it's amazing when you go to take statements from people at events like this, or I hate to say events, incidents like this. You'll get multiple descriptions of a perpetrator. They won't all be the same. And the thing about it is people are seeing it from different perspectives. Some people are hearing things and they're not seeing anything. And hearing sometimes can be just as good as seeing. If you've got your head down and your face is buried, your eyes are not turned, you're trying to avert, but you hear them say something. Maybe you pick up on a certain word that they might use, some kind of command that they might use. Or if you're laying there in the dirt and you're face down, you hear them say, they might call out somebody's name specifically. And that gives you an indication of who the target was, because in a big group like this, how are you going to know who's there? And are you there to specifically identify somebody and you're going to take them out? But so many of these things are randomized, Dave, that you go all the way back to the firefighters, those two unfortunate young men that were shot in the firehouse, one of which died and the other survived. Why? You know, it's almost like throwing a brick through a stained glass window. Why are you going to do that? You know, it doesn't make sense at all, unless, again, it's a warm-up act. And if that's not the warm-up act, I want to know how far in his past has he been committing violent crimes as well. Dave, when this thing finally goes to trial, first off, it is going to be a capital murder case. You can take that to the bank. That's going to happen. And he is going to be looking almost certainly at the death penalty. They're going to make that happen, I would imagine, the prosecutors. The amount of forensic evidence in this case, to say that it's a tidal wave is an understatement, because just like I mentioned, for every person that was shot by this guy, there will be ballistics. There's going to be forensic pathology that's going to come into this. They're going to talk about things like, how long did they live? Did they suffer? And then you're going to have all of these people that are also witnesses that have been injured that are going to get up on the stand, and they're going to talk about what happened that night. And they're going to say, I can guarantee you, I can see it come. The prosecutor's going to say, now, if you don't mind me asking, sir, can you tell us that night, the night of the shooting, where were you shot specifically? Yeah, I was shot in my stomach twice. And sir, may I ask, how many surgeries did you have to go through? I don't know, 2, 3. How long were you in the hospital? 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And have you fully recovered? No, they say I'm going to be like this the rest of my life. They're going to hear that in court, Dave, over and over and over and over again. It's hard to take the measure of the damage that has come about at the hands of this individual. We're going to stay on this case, watch it very, very closely, and keep everyone up to speed on it, because this is not going to be over with anytime soon. I'm going to be interested to see if he has in fact been involved in any other shootings that he could be credited with, any other deaths, any other assaults. And the big mystery here that the cops have not really let on to a lot about at this point in time is if he is a hitman. Who is it that hired him? What was their motivation? And where did he get the weapons to perpetrate these crimes? I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.